Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have a special guest. Tony Mariello is a naturalist, a Florida naturalist, and he is master naturalist, and he's going to introduce himself and tell you a little bit more about his background. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and listening in to the presentation on butterflies of Southwest Florida. Mr. Mariello, you can go ahead and start your session.
Thank you, Aga. Well, as the slide says, we're going to be talking about butterflies in Southwest Florida. And how did I get involved? Well, as Aga mentioned, I'm a Florida master naturalist and went through the University of Florida course on Florida Master Naturalist. And we learned a lot about just about everything in nature. And butterflies were always curious to me because they're just beautiful creatures. And we're going to be covering quite a few items here today. First, a lot of folks don't know the difference between moths and butterflies, so I thought we'd talk a little about that. And just some interesting facts about butterflies, the life cycle, which is amazing, and the services they provide, their strategies for survival, the threats that they face. And we'll look at some of the most common butterflies found in Southwest Florida. Not all of them, but we'll take a sampling just because of time. And then how to catch a butterfly if you're so interested. So around the world, there's about 20,000 butterflies. And in the US, about 725. And about 200 migrate through here. So some of the butterflies that you may have seen may not be ones we talk about today, and that's because they're migrating through. But we will look at the common ones. There's about 30 that are most common down here, and we'll try to catch most of those in the presentation. So first of all, for moths versus butterflies, one of the key ways to show the difference is by looking at their antenna, if you can get close enough. The moths have a feathery or saw-edged antenna, as opposed to the butterfly, which is kind of a club shape with a long shaft. It's much longer than the one that the moth has. The wings also, if the creature lands, if it's a butterfly, most of the time it folds its wings together. But if it's a moth, it usually sits there flattened. But sometimes the butterfly is foolish by doing the same thing. But most of the time, this is the case. And as far as anatomy, the butterfly, they have a separate forewing and hindwing, whereas the moth, the forewing and hindwing are joined. So again, if you get close enough and take a look, you can tell the difference. So the butterfly is primarily diurnal, comes out during the day. And most moths are night flyers. In the pupa stage, the butterfly makes a chrysalis, which is hard, smooth, and has no silk covering, whereas the moth has a cocoon, which is wrapped in a silver covering. They're very different looking. So it's another way to tell the two apart. Just some interesting things. Not true that if you touch a butterfly wing and the powder rubs off, that the butterfly will not be able to fly. The powder is actually tiny scales, and the butterfly sheds these scales throughout its lifetime. So that's not true. And the word butterfly is thought to originate from a European folklore that holds that these insects sit around dairies sought to steal sips of milk or butter. I don't know if that's true, but it's just interesting. So how do they communicate? How do they find the host plants that we're going to talk about? How do they find mates? Well, it's this this chemical substance called a pheromone, and it's released into the environment. It affects your behavior and physiology in so many ways, and the male uses it as a sex attractant. So looking at the morphology or form of the butterfly, pretty much as you'd expect with the legs and the femur and so on. I circled the head area, which is important. You'll notice they have 6 legs. Most of them use all 6, some don't, as we'll see. and the thorax, which is the area that you can actually hold the butterfly without injuring it if you do catch one. So the life cycle, as I mentioned, is amazing. If you've ever had the opportunity to watch the chrysalis develop, it's fascinating. But as you can see, they have a short lifespan. They usually have a 4-week span. The first 5 to 7 days, they lay the eggs on the host plants, which we'll talk a little more about. And then eventually the eggs will hatch in about 3 days, and you'll have caterpillars on your plant. And then 10 to 12 days later, the chrysalis will form. And then again, another 10 to 14 days, the butterfly will come out of the chrysalis and fly away. Now, some folks say, well, what about the monarch? They fly thousands of miles to California. Well, their morphology is a little bit different than most butterflies, and their lifespan is a little longer than most butterflies as well. So they're an exception to the rule, if you will. So what services do they provide? They certainly pollinate our plants, population control for a number of plants and even insect species by eating them. They're, of course, sustenance for other species like birds. And scientists use butterfly population and behavior shifts as metrics for changes and problems in the local environment. And, you know, scientists are doing this more and more with various birds and other creatures like sea turtles. So there's a lot of analysis going on to help us understand the local environment. Their strategy for survival, of course, the color. They use it as camouflage, disguise, warning to predators, and so on. As you can see, toxins from nectar plants. They know which plants to eat and which ones not to eat. So they only select certain nectar plants and certain host plants. And their flight patterns, of course, if you've ever seen a butterfly, how would you catch it? Very hard to catch. You need a big net to do that. But these are some of the strategies they use for survival. Threats, of course, habitat loss. A lot of development going on, and their habitat is declining. Most areas down here where there are developments and HOAs, you'll notice very few native plants or plants that the butterflies recognize. Most of the plants are from South America, Africa, Asia in our landscape, so the butterflies do not recognize those plants. As I mentioned, there's toxins in plants, and they know which ones to eat. They only eat certain ones, and the ones they eat are native plants. So you can do a big favor for the butterfly and start planting some native plants in your yard. The use of herbicides, here again, you need those for non-native plants. If you have natives, you don't need herbicides. They know how to live here in this area. They don't need water. And genetically modified crops, frequent roadside mowing, just things like that. And OE at the bottom there, Ophiocystis electroscura, which is harming the monarchs, as we will see. So these are the butterfly families, the ones in particular here in Florida: swallowtails, Apollos, birdwings, skippers, whites and yellow, blues and coppers, winged butterfly, gossamer winged butterflies, metalmark, and brush-footed. And we'll just take a sampling of some of these as we go through. Some you might recognize. They're easily recognized by their silhouette. As you can see, they're very different from one family to another. We'll start with the swallowtails. We have 6 of them here on the slide: the pipevine, the giant, the eastern tiger, the zebra, the black, and the helodamus. And probably in this area, the giant is the one you will see most often, although the eastern tiger swallowtail also, you'll see that as well. Right across the street from here at Koreshan State Park, you'll see a lot of those 2 butterflies flitting around because their plants are there. So looking just at the giant swallowtail, You can see that the nectar plants they like are lantana, goldenrod, and milkweed. And so there are milkweed and there are goldenrod across the street in the park. So that's why you see them there. The host plant they like is the citrus family. They also have some wild lime trees over there, which they enjoy laying their eggs on. So these are the types of native plants that these butterflies recognize and use to prosper. Skippers. The skippers usually hang out around wet areas, wetland areas. So if you have a pond nearby, you'll see maybe a long-tailed or an Aaron's or a Brazilian, a palmetto, a fiery, or a clouded skipper. These are very tiny butterflies, and they flit around very, very quickly, hard to capture, and sometimes difficult to see because they don't rest very often. But if we just look at one, you see this guy likes white and pale yellow flowers for nectar plants. So if you have like, maybe like a senna in your yard, or any kind of sunflowers, like a dune sunflower, or perhaps tick seed, anything with a yellow flower, you might see a skipper around, especially if you're near water. And the host plants are canna. So canna, as you know, grow around ponds and so on. So that is why that's their host plant. That's where they lay the eggs. And by the way, at the bottom of the slides, I'm showing the caterpillars. So you can tell when you look at the caterpillar what kind of butterfly you're going to see in the area. Then there's the whites and sulphurs. We see a lot of these in our yard. I'm about, maybe a mile from here in Estero. And the reason is because we have a lot of plants that they like as a host plant and also as a nectar plant. The cloudless sulphur, I've seen that. I've seen the orange barred sulphur and the large orange sulphur and the great white. They're all here and they're all feeding on our plants. So just looking at the cloudless, lantana and morning glory, we do have lantana. We have sennas too, which is their host plant. But you can see by the caterpillar, it's just a very attractive caterpillar. And as soon as you see it on the plant, I guess it's about an inch to an inch and a half, just covers the plant. And one thing different about the sennas and these butterflies, they don't eat the plants completely down before they hatch or before they form the chrysalis. They leave a lot of leaves and flowers on the plant. So they're a little different than like milkweed, for example, which we'll talk about. The southern white, a little different. It also likes lantana, but also verbena and saltwort, which is a plant that you'll find along the coast. So here again, this is a butterfly you'll see more near the coastal areas. And the host plant, and the mustard family. So a little different than the yellows. The hairstreaks, very rare in this area, especially the Atala. You'll see them mostly in the Miami area, but I have seen gray hairstreak here feeding on our lantana. It likes milkweed and dotted horsemint and seaside goldenrod, which is all over the place down along the shoreline. But most often they favor the pea family and mallow family for their host plants. So if you have these plants nearby, you'll probably see the gray hairstreak. It's an amazing plant. And this is a butterfly. And this is a butterfly that kind of mimics other creatures by those little eyes on its wings. So if a predator is coming and sees that, it might feel like, oh, this is not a good thing. This is something that might attack me. So there's another one that we'll see that looks similar to that, where they have these different forms on their wings that may mimic a different animal or different species. So Metalmarks, not too common here, but the little metalmark you might see as well. But you see they like a variety of thistle and lantana. Lantana is a very popular plant, as well as milkweed with butterflies. So anything in the aster family, if you have that in your yard, you may draw in some of these metalmarks. The brushfoots, well, there's a lot of them in this area. The Gulf Fritillary, the zebra heliconia or zebra longwing, which is our state insect, Florida state insect, the Julia heliconia, and the Monarch. So they're all part of that same family. And if we just look at well, let's look at a few more. We got a malachite, a queen, ruddy daggerwood, and viceroy. The viceroy very often gets confused with the monarch. If you take a look at that, you'll notice a stripe toward the back of its center wings. And you notice the monarch does not have that stripe along there. So it's very similar, but you can tell the difference. If you see a viceroy, it's not a monarch. So anyway, one left, soldier, might also be mistaken for a monarch, but it's got a very different form, as you can see. So we got the soldier, we got the viceroy, and we got the monarch, all fairly similar, but they're all brushfoots. And the name comes from the fact that their feet have these little brushes on them, if you were wondering. So the Gulf Fritillary likes maypops or passion vines. So if you have any type of vine in your backyard on a trellis, and it might be one of the maypops or one of the passion vines, you'll see a lot of Gulf Fritillary. And as you can see, the passion flowers are poisonous. And as you can see also, the caterpillars feed on them. So here again, it's this natural cycle in life where these caterpillars become immune to the toxins, and they know where to go to find the food, and it's the passion vines or maypops. Zebra longwing also likes passion vines. The corky stem passion vine is one of their favorites. As I mentioned, it is the state insect of Florida and one of the largest lived butterflies, with adults surviving up to 6 months. That's a long life. They do migrate, so I guess they need that time to migrate. Again, you'll see a lot over here in the park, Florida State Park, because there's lots of passion vines in the park. The monarchs, they are found here year-round, but some take that epic migration to Mexico. They are totally dependent on milkweeds. And there are many milkweeds that we have that are native to Florida. And there's one bad one, which we'll talk about, that unfortunately the folks pick up at the big box stores. But if you've ever been to California and you can see this, it's absolutely amazing. You look up into the eucalyptus tree and you will see thousands of monarchs clinging to the branches and to each other in that tree. And that's where they go to mate and to spend a lot of the winter months, especially with those that migrate. But it's a fascinating sight to see. The true brushfoots, red admiral, mangrove, and notice the mangrove buckeye has those eyes as well, and the white peacock, which we see quite often in this area. The mangrove buckeye, of course, is in the mangroves, the black mangroves. And if you're ever along the beach, take time to take a look and see if you can find these mangrove buckeyes. They're just a gorgeous butterfly to see. So as it says, the bold, multicolored wing spots startle predators into thinking the buckeye is a bigger animal. And the white peacock, as I mentioned, they like Biden's alba, which is a plant that you see all over here growing wild. Many times it's pulled out as a weed, but it has a white flower with a yellow center. And if you see a white flower with a yellow center out here anywhere, it's probably a Biden's alba. It attracts butterflies, especially the white peacock. And it likes water hyssop as a host plant. So again, they hang out near ponds and so forth. So if you're interested in catching a butterfly, they're just fun to watch and to look at the different parts of the butterfly. You need a good quality butterfly net, one that's at least 24 inches deep, because once you get them, you have to trap it quickly or it'll fly right out. So you need a deep butterfly net, And once it's in there, you just twist the top and you capture the butterfly. Now, when you see them, you have to wait until they're feeding on flowers, and you sneak up behind them and swoop them into the net. I see people running around trying to catch them in the air. That's a very difficult thing to do. So you just sneak up on them when they're sitting on a flower. And you sweep the net forward, as I mentioned, quickly, and flip the end of the net bag over the net handle if you catch a butterfly, to prevent them from flying back out of the net, because that's the thing they will do. They will instinctively want to fly back out of the net. So then you can actually, after you collapse the net, there should be enough space at the deep end to prevent damage to the butterfly. You gently flatten the net bag so the wings of the butterfly are closed over its back and the thorax. And place your thumb and forefingers over the leading edge of the wings and in the thorax area, and you can observe the butterfly very carefully without injuring the butterfly. And then just unwrap the butterfly net and it'll fly away. So if you're interested in looking into this in more detail, there are many butterfly organizations you can find online. There's just a few here. The North American Butterfly Association. There's a butterfly site, thebutterflysite.com. Your Florida Backyard, NSIS.org, which is great. And of course, the Florida Native Plant Society, FNPS.org. All these resources have a lot of useful information on butterflies. And we have a native plant, see if I have a slide on that. Yeah, we have a native plant nursery close by here in Bonita Springs, where they have, it's a demonstration garden with mature plants, so you can see what they look like when they grow up if you're interested in buying some plants. But they have very knowledgeable people there. You can talk to them about butterflies and the plants that we talked about today. They'll show you the plants. You can purchase some if you'd like. But it's just a nice place to go and stroll around and see all these plants. They have a wildflower garden out front and two very different looking demonstration gardens as well. So there's the address, 26268 Cutting Horse Lane. You can put that into your GPS and it will take you back there. You might know where Farmer Mike's is. It's back in that area, just east of I-75 and on, I'm trying to think what the road is. No, it escapes me right now. But anyway, it's a good place to visit. They're open Tuesdays, Thursdays a work day for them, but they're still there, and Saturdays, 10 to 2. So I thought I'd just mention that. And so if there's any questions, I'll send this back to Aggie where we can see if anyone has any questions that I might be able to answer.
Yes, folks, go ahead and ask questions by raising your hand. And as soon as I see raised hand, I'll go ahead and I'll allow you to unmute yourself. So please go ahead and ask questions. Anina, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you for the program. Could you just go over the better milkweed plants we should purchase for encouraging the butterflies?
Yes, that's a great question. If you go to a native plant nursery, you're probably going to get the right one. There are red, there's orange, there's white milkweeds, and the only one you want to stay clear of is the tropical milkweed. That's a milkweed that you'll see in the big box stores very often, because they have beautiful orange and red flowers. But that is the one that has that OE we talked about, that protozoan that affects the monarchs. And so I think any native milkweed that you can find will suffice. Just stay away from the tropical milkweed.
Go ahead, ask your questions. No. Cindy, go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Sandy, go ahead, press the unmute button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually in Louisville, Kentucky, and I have an orange butterfly weed that I grow here. Can you tell me anything about that? Is that in the tropical family? How do you know if it's a butterfly weed or a milkweed?
Well, the only way you can be absolutely sure is to use the scientific name. If you go on to the Florida Native Plant Society website, or perhaps any of the butterfly websites, and look at the milkweed scientific names, when you go to purchase one, that's what you want to use, because as I mentioned, there's native orange and native red down here in Florida milkweeds, and maybe the same up where you are. And they look very, very similar to the tropical. So just by using the common names, it's very difficult to tell them apart. So what I would suggest is to go online, look up the scientific names of the milkweeds that are native, and use those when you purchase them. The one you have, it's hard to tell. It might be a native, it might be the tropical. I have no idea. If you know where you purchased it, if you go back and ask them about that, they may be able to tell you.
Okay. It attracts an orange and black beetle late summer into the fall that eats sap all around. It's bizarre. I don't see it on any other plant but that one.
Well, that's unusual.
Mm-hmm.
I have a suggestion, and I'm not sure if that's something that Mr. Mariella would agree, but would it help if you compared pictures from the native plants online to the picture or the actual plant that you have? Would that be enough to be able to say which one's which?
Well, as I mentioned, they look very similar. The orange milkweed, the native, and the tropical. They look even the scarlet milkweed, which is a native, looks very similar. And in fact, sometimes folks get them mixed up, and they'll go and say, I want a scarlet milkweed. And if you go to a big box store, they say, oh, we have those, and they're so full of tropical off their milkweed area. And so it's very difficult. Without knowing the scientific name, it's very difficult.
Folks, I just launched a poll. We wanted to find out from you what is your opinion on this presentation. So just take a brief 30 seconds before you log out. We also have one question that was typed in. Is there a mating season for monarchs?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because right now the caterpillars are forming down here in Florida, getting close to spring. And the males are very frisky. As soon as the female comes out of the chrysalis and is still hanging on the chrysalis, the males will come and mate with her because it's very easy prey for them. You know, they can sneak up on the female and mate with her. It's very difficult once they're out and flying around. So they start right away as soon as the chrysalis forms, which will be in another couple of weeks, getting close to spring, and that's when the mating begins.
Anina has one more question. Go ahead, Anina.
Hi, I just thought I would pass this along to everyone who's doing painting in this area. We painted our front door, had it done professionally. I guess I never looked up at the top of the front door because the painter said, what did you want me to do with those 7 chrysalis that were at the top of your door? I was thinking, oh, he's going to ruin it. But these painters knew. He took it off very carefully and scotch taped it onto the side of the frame, and they all opened.
Yep.
Oh, fabulous.
That's
So I just thought I'd pass that along in case anybody sees them on their doors or whatever, not to worry.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, Cindy, go ahead.
One other question. What can you tell us about the butterfly garden at Pelican Sound? I've walked through it. Like any updates? How is it doing attracting butterflies?
Yeah, I've never visited the butterfly garden. I'd love to, but I've never visited it, so I can't really comment.
I should probably mention that Mr. Mariello is not a Pelican Sound resident, but He actually has been kind enough to share his knowledge with us.
Okay.
So
Is it close by here?
yes, it is. I can definitely show you where it is.
Yeah, if you just point me in the direction, I'll be happy to go over and take a look.
Sounds great.
And I can
Anyone?
I can send you back some comments. You can pass them.
That'll
on.
be great. Yes, and I can share with all of you.
Sure.
Is there anyone in the group who has worked in the garden or knows anything about it?
Anyone? No. Well, I don't think we have any additional questions. We wanted to, oh, there's one more hand risen. Cynthia, go ahead and unmute yourself. Cynthia, you may want to try to unmute yourself. I'm trying to. I see we're having a little trouble. Why don't you type in your question in the Q&A button?
I have one last question.
Go ahead, Anina.
Should we be concerned about encouraging the monarchs during November, December, because they should be moving on? Or do they basically stay here in Florida, and so we shouldn't worry about that?
Yeah, that's a great question because we have resident monarchs here. So they don't migrate to California. Most of the migration is on the West Coast where the colder climates are and in the center of the country. But down here, you know, the monarchs hang in here because it's nice weather all year round. So yeah, they'll be looking for milkweed, of course, but a lot of times the milkweed doesn't come back until spring. So they'll be feeding on other plants in the area, just looking for nectar plants. But you don't want to discourage them. No, they're residents.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't forget to submit your poll, please, before you log out. Do we have any additional questions? Mr. Mariello, we wanted to thank you so very much for visiting with us here at Pelican Sound. And oh, there's one more question. I apologize. The Monarch chrysalis in our butterfly garden Pelican Sound dried up. Why was that?
Oh, it dried up. Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell the reason why. The only thing I can think of is that the caterpillar may have been feeding on a plant that did not have enough moisture. And so usually the caterpillar knows that it has enough energy to form the chrysalis. But I guess all I can imagine is that the caterpillar started to form the chrysalis too soon and didn't have enough energy to go through the whole cycle.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for joining us today at the Pelican Sound session on butterflies, native butterflies. And Mr. Mariello, thank you so much for coming over. We hope to see you here at Pelican Sound, maybe sometime in person as we resume our regular sessions in class.
Absolutely.
Thanks again.
Thank you
again, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And by the way, my email is on this last slide. If anybody has a question that they just didn't think of, feel free to email me and I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.